Understanding how to use the compound clip feature in DaVinci is crucial because it can enable you to do so much more within the program. I can group multiple pieces of media in my timeline and treat that group or compounded clip as one piece of media. So if I want to apply an effect to multiple clips or change the speed, I can very easily do so by making a compounded clip. So really quick, let me show you guys exactly how to make a new compounded clip before I give you some more examples of how and why I would use this feature in my workflow. So in my timeline, I can select whatever clips I want. You can see that I have this little sequence right here. So let's select all these clips and let's right click, and you can see up here we have this option, new compound clip, or Command E. I pretty much always just use the shortcut. I never right click and select from this menu unless it's something that I don't use that often, but compounding your clips is something that I use pretty often. So in Ravenclaw, that's Command E, and we get the new compound clip window. In here, we can name the new compounded clip. So let's call this one sequence 1. We can click enter. Now, what I'm used to in both Premiere Pro and Final Cut is just double clicking on the compounded clip, and it would allow me to enter into that compounded clip, the timeline in there, and see all the individual clips that we use to make the compounded clip. But in DaVinci, it's a little bit different. What we're gonna wanna do is either right click and select open in timeline, or if you have the Ravenclaw keyboard shortcut layout installed, you can simply just press Command Shift E, and it will now bring you into that compounded clips timeline. So in here, we're able to see all the clips inside the compounded clip. This is basically the timeline within the compounded clip. So we can make any changes that we want in this timeline, and it will update in the original compounded clip here. So let's just go into some of these clips. Maybe let's just add an effect to one of the clips here. So we can go to our effects library. This is just for an example. We can drag any effect here. So let's just find something. Let's mirrors here. And we can see that this clip has now been mirrored. And if we go back to our original timeline and we scrub through to that part, we can see that we have now updated the original compounded clip. So anything that we are going to do within the compounded clip will update back into the timeline here. So a lot of the time, if I'm trying to work on a more complex little sequence or effect within my timeline, what I'll do is simply just make it its own compounded clip, and then that way I can just enter the compounded clip and make more layers, stack more clips in here, go more in depth with my effect in the compounded clip, so that way it's not taking up as much tracks in my main timeline, and just to keep my main timeline a little bit cleaner so things aren't all over the place. So now let's say that I want to bring my original clips back into the timeline. I no longer want them in the compounded clip. I want them back in my main timeline. What I was used to doing in Premiere Pro was going into the compounded clip here. I'd have to copy everything, Command C, go back to my original timeline, and then paste it in there. Command V, just like that. And then I would have to, bring those clips back to where I want them in my original timeline. But thankfully, DaVinci gives us a much easier way to do this. It's called decomposing your compounded clips, and I'm gonna show you guys exactly how to do that. So let's just delete these clips over here, and we can select our compounded clip. And if we right click on it, we can choose decompose in place. If we press that, it will bring back everything that is in the compounded clip back into this timeline. Now we can see that all of these shortcuts are a variation of the E key. So we have Command E, which allows us to compound the clip. And then we have Command Shift E to enter the compounded clip. And then lastly, we have Option or Alt Shift E to decompose in place. We designed all of the compound clips shortcuts around the letter E just to make it a little bit easier to remember. So that's Command E, Command Shift E, and then Option or Alt Shift E. So those are 3 shortcuts I would highly recommend that you memorize and implement into your workflow. So now that we understand how to create a new compound clip, how to enter the compounded clip, and how to decompose in place, let me show you guys a couple real world examples of how I would use this. So as you can see here, we have this same sequence. Now let's say that I wanted to animate the speed of these clips in the timeline here, but treat them as one clip. Now, if I wanted to just change the speed of all of these clips at once, what I could do is, select one of the clips, hit R, change it to 40%. And then what I could do is Command C, select everything else, Command Shift V, and I can apply the retime effects to all the clips. And we can see that we've retimed all the clips. But what if we wanted to play with the retime curve of all of these clips and treat them as though it's one clip? So what I would do is grab all the clips, turn them into a new compound clip, click enter, and now in here we can go into the curve editor, so that's Shift C, and we can select the drop down, select retime speed, and now we can start playing with the speed of the clip just like this. So we are essentially playing with this sequence of clips now as though it's just one clip. We can also apply an effect to this clip, and obviously it'll apply it to all the clips within the compounded clip. So let's choose a different effect here. Grab this abstraction one, for example, and we can see that that effect has now been applied to every single clip inside of our compounded clip. And just like any other piece of media in your timeline, you can go into the inspector here and change any of the properties just like you would be able to on any other individual clip. We can access the effects here as well. We can see the effect that we've added to the compounded clip, and we can turn it off or delete it. So in this timeline, I was actually experimenting with another transition. I have this one clip of the drone coming close to this wave, and I managed to kind of splice it together with this other shot of some other waves and just like the mist rolling on the waves. So pretty simple. It's just like a little mask and opacity fade because both of these clips start and end off in white. It was easy to make that kind of transition happen. So this little transition is a perfect example of where I would want to compound something in my timeline so that I can play with the retime speed of this sequence and treat it as though it's one clip. So here, if I play back in real time, I feel like the motion could be speed ramped a bit more so that it just feels a bit more seamless, and that actual transition part of the clip doesn't stay in frame for as long. So what I'll do is just select both of these clips, hit Command E, turn it into a new compounded clip. And now I can Shift C, show the curve editor. I can start changing the retime speed so I can kind of ramp this section right here so it's not as slow and it doesn't give the viewer as much time to figure out what's going on. It'll just happen a bit faster. And at this point, I'll just add another keyframe here, slow it back down. So now it's just that area, that transition period that's being sped up, and then it goes back to the original speed here. So I want to show you guys one last example of where compounding clips can be very helpful. So I have this clip in my timeline here. It's of this wave. Now let's say that I want to add some graphics over top of this. So one example that people use a lot is a subscribe button, right? So a lot of people are going to be throwing a graphic like this over top of their videos for YouTube and whatnot. Now we can see that there's a moment where the mouse clicks the button. So we can add a sound effect to that moment in time so that when we play it back, it actually sounds like the mouse clicked the button. And now let's say that we wanted to add this subscribe button in different places around our timeline. Now, instead of having to, copy both the graphic and the audio together each time and dealing with that, what we can do is select both of these pieces of media and compound them. Command E, make them a new compound clip. So we can just call this subscribe. And now both of those pieces of media are treated as one clip. Now, the reason they're not both being selected right now is because we have linked selection turned off. So if we press G or this button right here, now we are able to select both of those pieces of media and treat them as though they are one clip. So that's pretty awesome. And we can move this subscribe graphic and sound effect over top of any footage now. And of course, we can go into this compounded clip at any time, Command-Shift-E, and we can make changes to this graphic here too. So let's say, just for fun, we wanted to add something else to this. We wanted to add like a lightning bolt for some reason. We could go back to our original timeline. And the way to go back to your original timeline is to just look down here in the bottom corner. We can see that all selects is our root timeline, and this compounded clip is just one of the compounded clips within that timeline. We can double click there and it'll bring us back to our original timeline. Now in here, we can see that that little lightning graphic has also been added to this as well. And just like before, we can move this graphic anywhere in our timeline that we want. So this is very, very helpful. We can enter the compounded clip at any point, make changes in there. It'll update in our main timeline, and we can just click and drag this, put it anywhere that we want on the timeline. We can hold Alt and drag to make copies of it, put it in different places. Super, super useful. So that's pretty much it. You guys have seen how I use compound clips in my workflow to do things that would normally be much harder and time consuming to achieve. Compound clips are extremely important to me as an editor, and I highly recommend that you take the time to experiment yourself and get familiar with this feature. But that's it for this video. I hope you guys learned something new. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.